Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the December, 4th meeting of the Admin Committee. Ann, could I please ask you to take roll
Sure. Vice Mayor DeRosa,
here?
Ms. Saludo,
Here.
and Ms. Fox.
Here. Great. We have minutes to approve of our May 7th meeting. Could I get a motion to do that, please?
So moved.
In a second?
I'll second.
Ann, please.
Ms. Saludo,
Yes.
Ms. Fox,
Yes.
and Vice Mayor DeRosa.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody. We have a couple agenda items this afternoon to look at engagement with residents across the community, and then to look a bit more at our recruitment processes with our boards and commissions. So we're going to do the agenda in that order because, Sue, I understand you have about a hard stop in about an hour. Is that right?
That is correct. I have a 2:00 meeting.
Oh, great. And we have to participate. So, okay, so the first topic is to really think about kind of what we're learning in this COVID age as it relates to communication and outreach with residents. And I know some of you, I know Jane, I don't know who all was on the ED 411 call this morning, their annual conference. And it was really interesting to listen to some of the changes that they say that we're going to be facing, and that how many of those are being accelerated by the, frankly, COVID pandemic and changes. And I thought it was interesting that one of the top things, and I'm looking at my notes here, that they said that we are going to have much greater and more rapid technology adoption that we'd ever thought of. And frankly, we're not going back. So how we think about doing work and how we think about communication and how we think about models is really going to not only change moving forward, but change probably faster. So we thought maybe we would participate in a discussion this afternoon about what we've learned and what things we might want to do in terms of communication and outreach, both from resident to city, but resident to council as well. So with that as sort of a little bit of a backdrop, I had asked Sue if she wouldn't please prepare for us and for discussion some of her team and her observations of what we're seeing for outreach, and then thought we'd have a dialogue going from there. So with that, Sue.
Thank you, Chair and Vice Mayor DeRosa. Yes, this has been a very interesting and challenging year, but also a year that I think we have learned a lot about resiliency, about creativity, and we've learned a lot about our residents and what is resonating with them. And we know that they are spending more time at home. We know they're spending much more time online. We also have had to shift a lot of the things that we do because we're in a pandemic. A great example is video production, as everyone, I mean, the news media, anyone producing, even the Grammys, the Emmys, everyone has had to do a different format. And we had to adopt a Zoom format for a lot of our Dublin News Now videos. But we have tried to find other creative ways to bring messages to residents, but also everything we do is not just broadcasting to them, it is engaging with them. And all of our platforms, we measure our platforms every week. Bruce does a great job of providing my team the metrics on our Dublin News Now e-news, but all of our engagement on Facebook, Nextdoor, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, and we have seen tremendous growth in video consumption compared to a year ago. So we've got stats from 2019, same measurement period. Facebook, I believe it was about a 233% increase in video consumption from a year ago. And on YouTube, which we have really, really utilized YouTube. We're using it right now, right? With all of our public meetings, but really adding that video YouTube channel to the city's platforms and really encouraging people to subscribe to that platform. That increase has been almost 500% consumption of video. We've also produced more video, and I don't have the exact numbers in front of me yet. We usually do a full, look back, from Shared Vision. And keep in mind, Shared Vision produced a lot of videos for us. We produced a lot of our own through the Zoom, but then Shared Vision put the final touches and the B-roll. So again, it was just a shift in the way that we normally produce video. Last year, we produced over 100, almost 160. I'm guessing it's way more than that this year. The other thing that we've also really recognized with residents is there is a need to converse with each other. And Nextdoor is the platform that we see the most conversations happening. And one of the good things about Nextdoor, well, there's a couple good things I'm going to mention. So Nextdoor is almost at 20,000 residents verified by Nextdoor, who are using Nextdoor as a platform for information, for connectivity with each other. And it is a platform, unlike most, that has rules. It has rules of civility. And this year, we couldn't have welcomed civility more because there was very little of it. And so while Nextdoor has rules and they really try to emphasize the civil conversations or civil discourse, there were lots of times that content had to be removed, especially leading up to the election. But any topic this year is polarizing, any topic. You can't imagine the most benign topics that we would think we're putting out could be polarizing or controversial. So we're seeing residents want to engage, but also wanting to ignite. But Nextdoor is a place where there are rules and there is more civility, unlike Facebook. So Facebook, another great platform, right, has been around for quite some time. And we've got great numbers on all these platforms. But what we have noticed this year, more so than any other year, are bots and fake accounts. And again, these are designed to stir up divisiveness and controversy. And the good examples are the back in June, right after a lot of the protests, and there was a post on the SROs that the school district had renewed the contract. And normally our police posts are just full of gratitude and appreciation for what our police do for the city. That one was so polarizing, so controversial. And the good thing is, though, we have technology. We have Zen City. Zen City is a sentiment analysis driven by artificial intelligence and human analysis. And the more we work with them, the better they know us. And what was great is any time of the day, anytime right now, we have a live dashboard on sentiment on all the topics that our residents are cued in on. And we also set up projects. So any project, we can get sentiment analysis. So that week, despite all of the negativity on that post, Zen City's AI was able to filter out the bots and the fake accounts, which we had no idea they had that capability until we compared what we were looking at on social media versus the report that we got from them, that the negativity ratio was much smaller than it appeared. So that has just been a fantastic tool this year. Other topics of great controversy, no surprise, wearing a mask, the ordinances, when the city issued their ordinance, and then Franklin County Public Health, and also then the state of Ohio. Anytime those went out, there was tremendous controversy. But when we would get the actual report from Zen City and they filtered out some of these fake accounts on Facebook, we would see a much different picture of what our residents were really feeling or thinking about wearing a face covering. Other examples of that, Halloween. We all remember the 2 days that we spent with our residents who were calling, emailing, posting online, in every platform. And that's the thing about Zen City, is that it doesn't just monitor our platforms. It also monitors other platforms that are, we call them unofficial. So all of the media platforms that are talking about Dublin, or if people are posting on a dispatch story or an NBC or 10 TV story that the city of New Albany has decided to postpone trick or treat, and then they're posting, comments about Dublin, they aggregate all of that through the AI. And that too, even though there were hundreds of interactions on all of the official, unofficial platforms on trick or treat, the report we got, the negativity ratio was 23%. We would have thought, from what we were experiencing those couple days that week, it would have been like 75%. So one of the great things about Zen City, and other cities all over the world are utilizing this technology to help make decisions for either communication teams like ours or management, and actually then reflect back on a program or a project based on a lot of this analysis. So these kind of tools will be tools that will become even more important in the future as more people are really living their lives online. And that is really probably some of the biggest observations we have made. We're able to do surveys through Zen City. We're also been able to do surveys through our Dublin News Now. And we've had really, really good responses through the surveys that we've done through Dublin News Now. The DORA survey was a great example. And the other thing that we have really noticed is greater public engagement in our public meetings. And a really good example of that is the 16133 Post Road Interchange meeting, where we had over 100 people sign up for that meeting. It was the first week of school. It was a beautiful night, still very summer-like. And we had over 30 people actually speak and do public comment at that meeting. And that is just a great example. If you've got a topic that people really care about and you've got really good content, which I think reflects the engagement that we've been getting on our platforms. Those two things are really the recipe for good community engagement. Bruce, do you have anything to add that I missed?
No, I think you summed it up, and I'm glad you talked about content, because that's the key right there. Dublin residents, business partners, they expect a certain level of, content from the city, and we provide it on a daily basis. So
Provide it, and then we measure it. And again, Bruce provides our team a snapshot every Monday morning. We look at it and we talk about it in our Tuesday staff meeting. And we are often very surprised, especially when we look at like the Dublin News Now that goes out on Sunday nights. And we're even playing with the times of day we send it out. We play with the days of the week. We're looking at maybe sending it out on Thursdays starting in 2021, because people are home and they're Monday through Friday, or their Sunday through Saturday might all look the same since they're working from home and there's online learning going on. So we, again, doing research on what days of the week are people maybe more inclined to open up and read and then click and link. And so we look at what topics resonate with people, what they really care about, and we're often very surprised. The other thing we do is we monitor every day we rotate staff. So today is Shirley's, she's the social media monitor of the day. And that means that staff member, and that includes weekends, that staff member is reviewing all of the comments that come into us through every single platform. And we often even get, like on Nextdoor, we get personal messages from people who want answers to something, or need information on something. And so staff is really communicating back and forth with residents all the time. And the one thing I did want to point out about Nextdoor, which is sometimes a problem, is that we as a city, we have a city page. We can post content, we can respond to residents in that page. We cannot monitor or respond in the neighborhood threads, and many times I know you see them. I can see them if they are including the entire service area of the city of Dublin. But one of the things that we share with the HOA leaders all the time, we remind them to remind their residents as well, their neighbors, that if they need a question or they need a city expert, rather than just throwing it out there on Nextdoor, which often happens, to contact the city or post it to the city's page. And what we're seeing and observing is more and more residents realize that, and they are actually providing that response. You should contact this director, contact the director of public works, or you may want to, or post this to the city's page. They may not be monitoring every single channel on Nextdoor. And that's just the way Nextdoor is designed.
Great. Thank you, Sue. I thought we'd also spend a little time and get some observations from the committee members, what we're thinking and seeing is maybe different. And I've asked Jenny Delgado to also share that from the clerk's office perspective too. So I guess questions for Sue or Bruce before we do that part? Okay.
Well, I guess, did you just ask any of us for questions?
Yeah, I was just asking people to share their observations of what they're seeing in terms of communication back and forth with residents during this, but I also, if there were specific questions that you wanted to ask Sue as well. So just.
No, that's okay. Go ahead.
Now, you want to share your observations as what you're seeing?
Are you asking Jane and I?
Yep.
Yeah. I honestly, a lot of what I'm seeing is I get a lot of text messages. Because I think sometimes people feel like that's a faster way to get a hold of me. So I get a lot of text messages. I get some emails too. I mean, that's mostly what I'm seeing. I know that our people like the videos a lot. They like the communication. I actually think people respond better to the one-off videos than they do to the regular videos. People tend to get a little bit of fatigue with regular videos, and they'll watch them all the way through for the first several weeks, and then they start not watching them all the way through, and then they just stop watching them altogether. We're experiencing that at my work as well. And so they'll switch to a different type of media. So they might switch from watching videos from the city's website to going to the Facebook page or engaging on Nextdoor. And they switch back and forth because they just get tired of one type of platform. And I think, that's what I'm hearing from people that I know as well. And it's interesting because they're getting a lot of the same information because we're putting that same information in multiple places. But for some reason, it's just more interesting when it's on Twitter versus the web page because they've been going to the web page the whole time. So I think having a variety of places where we're communicating will continue to be really, really important so that as people get fatigued by one type of outlet, they have another to go to, but they're still getting information. But just as far as individual engagement, it's mostly still through email and through text messages. I don't get a ton of phone calls. People like to text me.
Jane?
Yeah, for me, I think back on our first conversation about public participation when we had our first retreat back 3 years ago. And for me, one of the reasons that I think this is important is because, I think council needs to know that, kind of know what the resident sentiment is. And I really applaud the direction we've gone in the last couple of years, Sue, with some of these new technologies. You know, the Go app, the being able to use the Dublin News Now and getting responses back, Zen City to be able to understand sentiment. For me, I feel, and this is just my perspective from a council person's perspective, what seems to have increased for you and staff, I don't feel has increased for me as a council member to understand what resident sentiment is in any way different than I did 3 years ago. That's not saying that we haven't made progress on it, because I think between the residents and the city itself, there has been great progress. I, though, still get most of my comments on an email or with a phone call, or as Christina said, through text. And it seems to be the only real way for me to communicate with my citizens. What bothers me about that is that I think that a council's role as leaders needs to be able to be so visible to the public and so easy to reach, and to understand the sentiment of the public so that you can build public trust, so that you can then advance the mission of the city in order to get the things done that you hope to get done. And I feel like there's still a little missing link between the council's ability to connect with the citizens in a way that's very in two ways, back and forth in the conversation. It happens some at public meetings, and I think these Zooms have been really revealing because we have so much more participation. I could not believe that first Zoom meeting had 2,000 watches on Facebook. We've never had anything like that. So, like I say, I'm applauding the direction that you're all going. But for me, I'm missing the connection as a council member between myself and the constituents. I still feel like I got to call up every HOA member or every HOA leader, or I have to just answer complaints. I'm not getting the opportunity to utilize technology as you are as a council member. And I'm just wondering how that can help, how you can help us do that.
Jenny, did you have some observations that you wanted to share about how residents are interacting differently now, sort of during the pandemic, or your observations?
I don't think a great deal has changed for our office other than platform, obviously virtual meetings versus in-person meetings. We still get the same contact councils. We get a lot of questions. Now that we've offered up to submit public comment on the website, that's been helpful a few times. And that's still a means of communication that people are finding maybe when they didn't find the contact city council before. But other than that, it's not affected us too much other than the meeting actual format.
Those are kind of profound changes. My observations have been a couple things. I guess I might respond a little bit of what both Christina and Jane said. I see a lot of one-on-one. I get more phone calls. I'm a phone call person, so I maybe will get a tendency to have a few more phone calls than text and emails. But I see more people reaching out than maybe would have before. So I think this idea of I'm gonna use technology to contact not just a contact council, but I've noticed some of that, and it certainly is situational, right? So we know that. But I would echo Jane's thoughts as well, is that I'm not sure that from a council perspective, we have embraced as much of the technology changes as maybe the city has with the residents. So when I have been out looking, and I follow different cities and different communities, as many of you as you do on Twitter or whatever, there's a lot of council to community interaction on some of those accounts that that we're not yet doing. And I think there's a real opportunity for us to think about what are the abilities to have some proactive council to resident communication, and then platforms, frankly, from resident to council, resident to city communication as well. And there's just a lot more tools, and they're developing so much faster, right? I've been in a few Zoom meetings with residents where the participation levels are even greater than when they would come to a council meeting, right? They would have one or two speakers, but now we're seeing everyone is participating more, whether that's I'm typing something in the chat box, or I'm raising my hand, or I'm speaking. And so, I just think there's a real opportunity to say, how do we leverage that more broad-based communication from both a council perspective, and then continue to do certainly what the city has started to do. I think there might be some interesting, and I know there's some tools that create for exchange and engagement platforms. I get emails, as I'm sure you all do, from vendors promoting some of those tools. So opportunities to do that. So thoughts on that, Sue or Bruce, about how we might be able to advance some of those, or put some potential ideas together to bring back to council, full council, for consideration? Thoughts about that?
Bruce, do you want to go ahead? Look, you're going to say something.
No, you go ahead, and then I'll just feed off that.
Yes. So I think I'm not quite clear what I'm hearing. We do have the council meetings, twice a month, and of course committee meetings and special meetings. And we do believe that even when you go back into in-person meetings, that we recommend this hybrid version to go forward. Again, to your point early, Vice Mayor DeRosa, that from the meeting you were just on, people are changing habits, and these habits are going to become norms. So people are enjoying the opportunity to be able to participate in a meeting, especially a night meeting, and from their home, and we are seeing that greater engagement. Some of these platforms, and let us know which ones you're interested in, because we get all the emails. We have tested out several. We have adopted a couple, and we have stopped them, because what we have found is our strategy for the city. Now, I can't speak for council, but we look at the city, is to go where the people are. And we know where the people are. Some of these new platforms, Bang the Table, and there's many others, you have to sign up, create a profile, give them a lot of information to participate in another platform. So in many ways, and we've talked to cities who've done this, and we have explored some of these, is that if you've got a big project, if you're like undertaking a huge redevelopment or development, and you want people to really participate and give feedback, and really connect with city officials and council in that way, those are great platforms to do that. But for most people, we know where they are, and so we study our audiences. Now, for you, I know you're looking at other cities, and I know we had this conversation, I think, a year ago. Bigger cities like Columbus have, staff that serve council, and they have platforms that council is communicating directly from those social media platforms. So if you give us a little bit more idea of what your goals are. And the other thing is, if you want access to Zen City, we can give it to you. You won't be able to see individuals, but you'll see sentiment on a live dashboard any day of the week, and we can have Zen City train you on what to look for, how to read it. You get email updates. It is an incredible tool. If you really want to get sentiment not individuals, and that's the difference, right? You're getting contacted, and that's what Zen City was designed for government, for cities, for counties, to be able to kind of break through the noise of what we hear from that vocal minority often, and to really get a much better, clear view of what sentiment is. But we're happy to work with you on any of the ideas that you have and explore and test some things out. So really, if you have seen some things that you like, we are happy to experiment and explore and work with you on that.
I would really like that. I think it'd be really cool to see, because I think a lot of times we do react to um, a relatively vocal minority, or sometimes even one or two individuals, without, I think, having that fuller context of what the broader sentiment is. Um, and I'll even take the Halloween thing, for example. And where I had my own personal feelings about it, but what I loved about where we ended up was that we all ended up saying, maybe we should think about in the future of having a rain date, right? Or discuss it. Like, we brought up about a little bit of work for ourselves in that, but rather than sort of knee jerk reacting to it, we settled down. We're like, okay, the overall sentiment is we're fine. But that being said, in the future, let's improve how we're doing this, and maybe we consider having a rain date, or maybe we consider not going with Morpsies, always do it on a weekday recommendation thing, right? And what I love is that this coming year, we're going to have that discussion that I don't know that we would have had it not been for that kind of information and that kind of data. So I would love to have that kind of data so that I have that other context around the comments that people are making.
I totally agree with you, Christina. I think from the vantage point of a council member, and that's why I think it's really important to hear it from that perspective. In the end, the buck stops at the front porch. It always does. Or when you're in the grocery store line, it stops there, right? And it's so important to be aware of what the city is thinking. It is more than difficult. I can't even describe to you how hard it is to really get a gauge on how you represent somebody if you don't have a way to communicate with them. And it has to be two-way. Now, the old-fashioned way is you knock on doors, or you knew everybody in the neighborhood, or you went to an HOA meeting, but that's impossible now. So what's the path to help us do that? And Zen is one of those, because it gives us an idea on the sentiment. So we're not doing a knee-jerk decision-making on policies or decisions. So that would be extremely helpful. Other things, I think, is that methods and paths that would allow casual and easy conversation between council members and citizens, where they know that they could go to one place and ask a question instead of just emailing it or going through the city clerk's office. Sometimes they go through and they get answered by Nick, which is very helpful to hear how the response comes back. Because, for instance, right now there's a lot of controversy about a lot of developments going on in the city, and it's nice to hear, the way it's answered by the city manager's office, and also it's also nice to see, maybe what the conversation is from other areas of the other departments. It just gives us a richer foundation to be able to answer the questions and to promote public trust, I guess is what I'm saying. I think, I can make a ton of little suggestions on how to get council's face out front, which is fine. And I think that's important too, because people want to know who the leadership is in the city. And I think it's nice when they maybe see you on the street and they don't know who you are normally, because your face is either in social media, or you're not at every event. And now at the pandemic, you're pretty much in your basement. So no one really knows who you are. But it gives them an opportunity to walk up to you and say, hey, listen, I wanted to ask you about, or whatever. And I don't mind that. Maybe some council people do, but I think most of us feel really good about that. The goal 3 years ago was to take the spectrum of public participation from inform all the way to empower. And so I would just like to, the inform, consult, involve, collaborate, empower public participation spectrum is one that, and if you would like, and if for some of you who don't know that, and I'm sure you all do, it is just it's the International Public Participation Association that talks about ways to engage the public through a spectrum of one-way communication, which is informing, we send out information, to two-way, and it gets deeper and more involved and more engaged as you get to the other end of the spectrum. So I can make suggestions on, and happy to, on how I'd like to see council's face get out there. But most importantly, I think we need to figure out a way that council can understand the sentiment that's going on with the platforms that you're using now, engage us in that, and help us find ways to do a two-way communication with our citizens is really important to me.
If I could piggyback
Yeah,
off, sorry, Kathy. I've been with the city for, it'll be 20 years in December, which it's been awesome. And I've always said I've never been bored working for the city of Dublin, because I was hired as the website administrator, and I always, Sue's still hearing this. And that was my job, was the website. And in 20 years, we've gone from push, 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 here's information, you consume it, to now it's like, we're not the center of the world anymore. We're not the ones pushing this information out. We're dealing with the world, and we need to hear feedback. So that's, to piggyback on what you guys are talking about, we love new tools. I love new tools. I love setting up accounts and hearing and seeing what we can do with it. If it goes all the way to, to an actual tool that we implement day-to-day basis, that's awesome. If not, then we just scrap it and say we learned from it. One thing that over the course of the years we've heard is, like, when we set up our city Facebook page, it was people were like from different departments saying, hey, we need a parks Facebook page. And I'm like, no, you don't need a parks Facebook page. And I'll tell you why. Because you'll be excited about it for like 2 weeks, and it'll be push, push, push. You won't listen, and then we'll walk away from it. So we don't want to set council up to fail with some tool right out of the gate. So we do need to have like a content strategy behind it. Like, what messages do you want to get out? I know we've done the put stuff out there where you voted on something, and we put your face out there and say, hey, council did this, but I don't think that's what you're looking for on this. It's almost like back when you're in college and you had the office hours for the professor. I think that's kind of what I see as that. Maybe I'm off on this, but an open door policy that you're online a certain number of hours a day. If you want to have a conversation with us, maybe that's what we get to. But I definitely we don't want to set you guys up to fail by saying, hey, council, here's your Facebook page. So we wouldn't want to jump to that conclusion. But I think by listening here, we can help develop what that content strategy is.
Bruce, I think you're right. It's not that I want to be on Facebook all the time, because I don't really like to be on Facebook all the time. It's not that. It's utilizing what Sue was saying, where you understand some of the sentiment. And I think that you need to bring it up to the level that we understand it as well. So that way we can make these decisions based on data and conversations that come across. We probably need a little, as they said this morning, a little TQ information or some instruction, because I think you're moving so fast and in such good positive direction with the communication through the city that I personally, as a councilman, feel a little left behind in not being able to participate or understand or take advantage of what you're learning to be able to incorporate it from my position. I think that's really what I'm trying to help you say. Now, there's a lot of fun little things I can recommend to you. Like, I think we could do a big table virtual conversation with council members over Zoom. I mean, there's a lot of one-offs that we can do, easy little things that we can add. But really right now, I think it's important for us, as this conversation came along and I heard Sue's comments, I think we need to begin to start to take advantage of what you've already done and bring it up to the council level and see how we can use it to build on our work.
So can I ask you a question? So do you have some type of analysis that tells you sort of what are the conversations that are trending out there? Because I think it's one thing to say like, oh, we should have a big table or a small table or have 2 council members or whatever, because you also have to be cognizant of things like having 4 council members because of public meetings and all that other good stuff, right? But it's, I think, something different, and this is maybe what you guys were getting at, is to have a little bit more of a strategic approach to it. And maybe there are some conversations that are trending out in social media where we can say, hey, we've got 2 council members who are available, during this time. You can hop on this Zoom meeting with them and ask them questions about this particular topic. But it's a topic that's already trending, right? Not one we're just yanking out of the air. Like that kind of thing.
Christina, that is absolutely correct. And Bruce and I had this conversation this week, and actually regarding Zen City and anticipation of this meeting. And I said, I really think we should give them access. We have learned so much, and it is a tool that continues to improve. And the fact that we can create a project, so a topic. We have so many topics right now. We've got a topic on the tree lighting, so we can gauge, feedback and sentiment on anything that we're doing around the holidays. The door was a great example. We have multiple COVID topics, and actually Zen City has COVID topics for all of their cities, and they actually often compare city to city and give you back feedback to say your residents are much more favorable about wearing a face covering than the percentage of other cities that we work with. So they also give you that kind of feedback, and they actually even have the map broken down by ward. And then they have very specific topics that you can see that are trending, whether it's public service or it's safety. We often see when there is a few weeks ago, if you recall, there was a Dublin Kaufman mom and 2 students were in a horrible fatal traffic accident. So we noticed so much negativity on our sentiment dashboard around safety, and it was really all of the media covering that story, and the negativity could just be the sad faces, right? It wasn't like people were it wasn't like a some kind of topic that people were going to have to take a stand on, but it was really more that was hurting the community. We're seeing a lot of topics. Actually, what has been trending most of all these past several weeks, what would you guess? Schools. So that all comes in our report. It's all about schools. Do our residents separate the city and the school district? No. So we are often tagged in all of those stories, and we are, kind of lumped even in the negative stories. And there's been a lot of negativity around the school district. They've been under fire. And then when I was watching the ICMA videos from the conference this year, there were 2 cities, 2 or 3 cities. I think it was Fort Lauderdale, maybe Greensboro, North Carolina, and another one talked specifically how they used Zen City as a management performance tool, and because they were able to react or respond to hurricane situations, to COVID, to a lot of different things, which our team does in terms of messaging. But I think it would be great for you all to get access, to get trained, to even have, regular meetings with Zen City, which we do, just to touch base, to figure out how you can utilize the sentiment tool best to your ability as council members.
Yeah, so I think that you make a really good point. For example, with the The schools have been under fire for sure. I don't know how people expect the schools to know what the right thing is to do during a once in a lifetime, once in a 10 generation pandemic. But people don't separate the city from the school district. And it would be probably a good idea for, that's something that's trending for council to spend a few minutes with the public to say, hey, as a reminder, we are not the same public entity as the city, as the schools. However, here's how we see this. Here's what our sentiments are about this. Here's how we feel about this. And we work and are in communication with school leadership regularly so that they know that it's, even if we're saying we're separate, that we have a partnership with the city, and the city schools. And but for us to be able to get that out there with people and explain to people and answer their questions and even help to direct them in the right direction for who they should be talking to. Because sometimes they just don't know. They just kind of blah it out there because they're upset about something. And, people, we all do that. We're humans. It's just part of what we do. Humans are a little bit messy sometimes. But for us to be able to address that as a trending topic and give people an opportunity to talk to us, even though we're not necessarily the leadership of the school system, we partner with them, we can help to give them direction in terms of who they should be going to talk to, and how they can open up that conversation in a constructive way. I think that's a great example.
So we have about 10 minutes left on this topic before we're going to run out of window here. So I heard that there seems to be consensus here that finding a way to engage us more with some of this, the reports and engagement, I think is a positive, and I'm getting head nods from you guys that you're willing to help us do that. I think there's a couple other areas about how to create more exchange. I mean, Jane made a comment about seeing people on doorsteps and in grocery stores. More and more people are expecting to see us online and in those forums like Instagram and Facebook and others. They're expecting to run into us in those spaces now. Maybe they didn't a while ago. So I'm not suggesting necessarily, Bruce, that we want to run our own Facebook pages or whatever, but maybe we do. I'm not suggesting that we don't either. I'm not putting in a here or there. But, one of the things that I considered discussing coming in here was, how do we think about putting a resource with council saying, what would be strategies? Just as you mentioned, Sue, that, we meet every Tuesday and we talk about how's our strategy for X going. That, what is the strategy for having council meet residents online where they want to be as a strategy goal? What are the ways we could do that? And here are several mechanisms in order for us to do that, because they expect us in those spaces, and we're not there yet in enough ways. I mean, we have a web page, but it's static. Do we have office hours around some things that are trending, et cetera? I don't know, but how do we meet with residents in the spaces they expect us would be the strategy goal. Is it possible to try a few things? And I'm not sure, maybe we get some external expert who has done this to give us advice about here's 5 or 6 ways to engage. And to your point, here's some things you just don't want to do. So don't go down that path. But really, Sue asked the question, what is the goal? And the goal is, let's be in the spaces they expect us to be. Let's be proactive with them, and figure out ways to do that. Because it's not just front doors and it's not just parades. That isn't the world that we're headed to.
Right.
Yeah.
And the good thing is with all of the digital platforms that we have currently, we know where people are. We know actually if you want to engage really with residents, the number one platform for that right now would be Nextdoor. So I don't know how you feel about Nextdoor and how you would feel about, but that is one thing we could explore. We have done that with police. We have a Nextdoor profile for Sergeant Rice, right? We want our residents to get safety messages. Sometimes they mean more coming from Sergeant Rice than they do from us. And, there are often many times I hear and see, and I'm sure you do as well, where people are making comments. I'd like to hear from a council member on this topic. I haven't heard from anyone from the city on this topic. So it might be something to consider and talk about, and where you all have projects or topics that are very near and dear to your heart or you're passionate about, or there may be development happening in certain areas of the city that might be in your ward, and maybe there's a way for you to engage with residents on Nextdoor. The great thing about Nextdoor as well is we can target a neighborhood. So if you really only want to target your specific area, or this area that maybe is feeling the impact of a proposed development, we can do that as well. So I'm just throwing some of those things out there to kind of think about. And that's where we could really work with you to help create your profiles, help create some content strategy around that.
So Sue,
Um,
are we able to create a separate profile from our personal one on Nextdoor?
yes,
Okay,
you
so
are.
that's really
I have two profiles. I have
Yeah.
my personal profile, which is why I'm able to, kind of see some of the hot things that might be trending in Nextdoor that the rest of my team can't. And then I've got a city profile.
right. I think that's really key
You
because
could have an official city council profile.
I think that part of the concern has been about council members personally are representing themselves, but coming across as representing the rest of council. And so I would be all for doing this, but I think we have to do it in a really, really careful, planful way, because we also don't want to get ourselves into any kind of issues legally as well. Right? There's a strategy to it, is all I'm saying.
Correct. It could be a
And
slippery
that's just one avenue, right? That may be
Great
not,
example.
but would it be a fair request? And I'm not trying to rush this, but I'm cognizant you're going to turn into a pumpkin here in a few moments. Cognizant that we agreed to and perhaps this is put some suggestions together, put some strategies, interview and survey and meet with each of the council members, et cetera, and to gain a plan going into 2021, yay, that says something that, how do we engage where the residents expect us to be and vice versa? And to put together some tactics and the caveats, as Christina was saying, the goods, the bads, and the concerns related to those. But could we agree that it might make some sense to get a dedicated resource, assign somebody to help us, Sue? Maybe it's you, maybe it's Bruce, or whoever, to help us through putting an approach together. Would that be or if there's another suggestion of how we might advance this?
Oh, absolutely. We can definitely do that. I think it would be very valuable to talk with each of you about your goals and ideas, and then we will, look at the best platforms, and even if there are other tools out there that we're not utilizing, and come up with some. But it really is, as Bruce said, it is about content strategy. I mean, that's what we do every week, and there would have to be content strategy, and there would have to be some best practices, because you're right, Christina. You don't want to get into any legal trouble. It's so easy to get into trouble on social media, right? We all have to be really careful ourselves. I mean, that is something that we are cognizant every week. I mean, this year more than ever, how many brands have been crucified for a faux pas on social media? It's unreal. And it can happen like that with the best intentions. So we want to make sure that none of you we want to protect you. We want to, help you be the ambassador and the leader in the community that you want to be. But we want to make sure that it is strategic, thoughtful, and legal as well, right? That, and just so you know, like you'd see probably a lot of the emails that Nick sends out. So if you can think that we're getting a lot of those as well, we collaborate with Nick. We've got a spreadsheet that we maintain because those comments come in from so many different places. And I would love to just have one portal for everything to come through. Bruce and I have talked about that for a while because that way we can also have a unified message. So not only do we have those coming through the website, like we're getting, but we have those coming every single day through every platform, through Facebook, through Twitter, through Instagram, not so much Instagram, mainly Facebook, and next door, where we're getting a lot of those same questions. And so we're able to figure out what are those hot topics, and they go in waves. And so then we look at that Sun City report, and that gives us a better, clearer, true picture, right, of sentiment, which we can also get you connected with fairly quickly. At least let's plan for it like in January, but we'll get you all access and trained and all of that.
Great. Okay, so we have a go forward. So we appreciate it very much. And as we hopefully very soon begin the end of the first COVID situation, there will be things we'll want to carry forward, as you mentioned earlier. So, and new tools. So I appreciate that. And any other comments before we move to the second topic today? You're muted, Jane. You're muted, Jane. You're garbled. I don't know what's happening there, Jane. We're not hearing you. There we go. Try again, Jane. You're muted. All right, she's going to pause. Okay. So thank you very much. Second topic. We wanted to talk, and Christina brought this topic forward for discussion in a while ago, and we're finally getting an opportunity to spend some time on that. And that is to look at the recruiting, and I'm going to call it awareness building in our community for our boards and commissions. So we could, certainly talk about onboarding, we could talk about training, we could talk about a variety of things from boards and commissions, but really the idea of how do we make the community aware. I guess this piggybacks on this last conversation we're having quite well, of what those opportunities are. How do we think about new tools or new approaches to build a pool or to maintain a pool or to promote a pool of residents who are interested to bring forth and engage more effectively in that. So that really is the topic. I asked Jenny Delgado to please also look at what some other communities are doing. So I know she's ready to share with that. But before we went to that, I don't know if Christina, you wanted to add anything else as sort of a goal or introduction before we discuss?
No, the only other thing that I might add is that I think the other issue that we kind of suffer from, and maybe part of the staff's recommendation about allowing people to, allowing residents to apply at any time of the year would help to alleviate this. I think part of the problem that we have is every 2 years, when we have council elections, the person who sits in the vice mayor role, Kathy, as you well know, is responsible for bringing in and doing the whole interview process for our boards and commissions. The problem that we have is we run into a timing issue where the person who is currently in that role, either they know they're not going to be the vice mayor again, or they're not sure if they're going to be, because we don't figure that out until January in executive session when we all sit together. And so, unfortunately, though, that's the period of time that we need to be bringing people in and interviewing people and going through that process. And so it's a little bit of a lame duck situation, if you will. And so that would be the only other thing that we might want to just talk through and say, like, no, here's the expectation. If you're vice mayor all the way up to January X when we elect another vice mayor. So that would be the only other piece of it. But otherwise, you hit the nail on the head. You're muted, Kathy.
Thank you very much. Good heavens. Yeah, we need some sort of a flashing something when you start to talk. Let's develop that technology. So Jenny, do you want to share a little bit? I had asked her if she would be so kind as to reach out and to see what some of our colleagues are doing, and then we can do what we did before, sort of go around the table and talk about various ideas and suggestions. So Jenny, thank you.
Sure. I found that, as most things are when we poll other cities, every city is different in how they handle their processes. They do what works for them, or whatever has always been done, or whatever. Usually there's no uniform way of doing it. This is no exception. Two notable things, though, is that I caught on to right away is that every city, except for us, was allowing people to apply year round. They had that recruitment site up, whether they had vacancies or not. There were some more robust websites, and then there were some other kind of simple ones, whatever. All the information was there, but you kind of had to really want to read paragraph after paragraph. It wasn't very dynamic. It wasn't very exciting. And the other notable difference was that their terms ended December 31st, all of their terms. So at the end of the year, you knew it was coming, whatever. Now, I talked to Anne about that because we were the only standouts from that. No one else did it like we do it. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing or a good thing, but I learned from Anne that the reason that happened, I guess, years ago, because council members who knew there would be new council members coming on didn't want to make a decision for who would sit on a board if they weren't going to be the appointing body, or if they weren't going to be a part of the appointing body. So that's why that decision was made to take it into the next year. I don't know how you feel about that. It's, we make sure they're staggered so we don't have to replace the whole board at once, which is a good thing. But I think I have just a few recommendations that I came up with that I saw or kind of put together based on what I saw other communities doing. And I did talk to a few clerks who were, oh, you're studying this? We want to learn everything you learn. So give us all your information. I'm like, oh, great. I'm going to do all the work and you're going to get the benefit. But what that told me was that they all are kind of frustrated with the process too and know it could be better. So a couple of things, Vice Mayor DeRosa and I spoke, that the board and commission could be presented in a more dynamic way on our website. We could maybe have some of the board and commission members speak to their experience, talk about why they like to serve, what it's like serving, what do you need to know to serve, what have they gained from the experience, that sort of thing. Maybe a short video, something, I don't know, which may promote more interest, and maybe people wouldn't have to read paragraphs and paragraphs of things. I think it's really important to provide them with the opportunity to apply year-round, or at least express interest. If they didn't have their application up, the cities would have at least a questionnaire that looked a lot like an application, where the people would talk about their interest and why they want to serve, and without diving into which board am I suited for, what are my strengths, what am I really good at, what am I really interested in, what do I want to learn more about, and then we can maybe see where they would best fit on a board or commission. I don't think there's any downside to having a pool of interested parties. We have unforeseen, unfortunate, vacancies that we have to fill from time to time. So it's always good to have that pool of people ready. And then perhaps I was trying to brainstorm about other places we could get the word out, not just coming from the city. So I was thinking like Citizen U, they do Citizen U classes where they come to learn about the city. Maybe we do a little video about serving on boards and commissions. Maybe the Leadership Dublin class, maybe the chamber would be okay with us submitting a little video there, because these are people who want to be leaders in their city. These are people who want to network with other people in the city. This is a good way to do that. So those were just a few of the ideas I had. I did look into some software possibilities, but I was telling Anne before this meeting, I found that those really aren't going to help our recruitment process. Those are going to be more our behind the scenes backstage process that it would help with, but it's not going to do anything for recruiting. So I have that information. It was really interesting, but I didn't provide that to you because it doesn't really do anything for recruitment. So that's where things stand. If you have any questions for me.
That's great. Bruce?
I think Jenny nailed it right on the head, because we had this issue about 5 years ago, and HR came to our department and said, hey, we're not getting applicants for jobs, and we have so many lifeguard jobs that go unfilled. And it's like, what can we do? So we brainstormed and we came up with the more than a job concept. And it talks about dedication to service, exceeding as public servants, you exceed expectations of residents, and showing faces of people that are currently in those roles. That's how, and we spun that around relatively quick. Jenny, you're right about videos. And we were thinking, and Sue and I talked about this idea earlier today about council members too. You can show how you were boards and members, and then you've worked up your way to council. We need to backfill those seats, and then we need to think about future leaders as well. So I think that you're absolutely right that we need to show who our board and commission members are. I know right now on the website, we have their photo tucked away at the bottom. And we kind of need to elevate them a little bit more. So Jenny, I think you're right. And I think this would be an easy fix. And I didn't even think about the year-round application, but we have that on the city site now for job applicants. It's called a job interest card. So we could do that same concept with the board and commission members, where it's a form that, just tell us what you're interested in. And then we keep those guys, or we keep that talent pool on standby. So I think you're right there.
Right, because if someone visits our website in September and they're interested and they read about boards and commissions and, oh, that sounds interesting, but we have no mechanism for them to express that to us, we might lose a really good candidate there who doesn't think to come back and check again in January or February.
Yeah, I think too, Jenny, is there, have you thought about doing some, maybe it's quarterly, I don't know what the right cadence is, but social media advertisements, for lack of a better word, so that we're regularly putting things out there, not just when we need to fill positions, but kind of on a regular basis. I just selected quarterly because it seemed like a good thing to say, but I don't know if that's the right.
Well, no, I think that would be a great idea if we had that mechanism out there year round. Then we could be pushing reminders and things out every so often to people just to remind them, gauge interest, whatever.
Yeah, because we could also do, if we're doing that, because then it allows us an opportunity to take a look at the different skill sets that we have on each board throughout the year to say, gosh, I'll pick on planning and zoning. On planning and zoning, we have no architect. Like, we would really love to have somebody with architect skills. So we could go out there and we could sort of advertise. I mean, obviously everyone is welcome, but if you have an architecture background, we're especially interested in you, right?
Right.
Like
it gives the opportunity for targeted recruitment, which if we see no applicants that come in that happens to, use your example, be an architect, this gives us more time to start, rather than, okay, now we've got 2 weeks to find an architect to apply. So, I mean, we kind of ran into that a few times with our code restrictions of who we need to serve on a board. So and it definitely allows more time.
I agree. And I think it may alleviate the situation that we have every 2 years with the potential, vice mayor changeover, right? Because you'll already have a pool of people we can draw from. And then it's a matter of, leveraging you, Jenny, and Anne to help get those interviews set up for us, right? So we don't have to always worry about, who's going to be vice mayor and who's not going to be, right? We can still get things set up and keep the ball rolling without feeling like it's last minute.
I think you've all nailed it. I mean, when I think about planning and zoning in particular, that's exactly what we're looking for. It is so important. Not only just, I think the video is great. I think people don't understand how you can engage in public service like that with the city because it's all in a paragraph form and it seems a little bit too intense.
Right.
And the selection criteria is vague and am I qualified and maybe I'm not. And then what happens is, and this is so common, all the council members will say this. They'll come in and we'll say, well, why did you come for this position? And they'll say, because I want to give back.
Yep.
Well, there's a place for you. Every one of those people who want to give back to the city, there's a place for you. But have we channeled them in the right direction? So when you do these, there's a variety of things looking at, what is the criteria that would make a good planning and zoning commissioner? That's a different criteria that would make an ARB commissioner and a totally different criteria that would make a Board of Zoning Appeals or any of the other committees. So videos make that easy because you can explain it. They can see it quickly. You can talk about what the obligations of the position are. Someone can say, this is what I do. And here's a link to the meeting so that you can watch it and see what's going on. And if you have any questions, here's the name of the chairman of that committee that you can call. I mean, there's just so many things we can do dynamically with a video that we could change this process and make it so much better for applicants and actually get a much richer pool of people.
Oh, yeah.
Instead of, not that we don't have a rich pool, but this is the thing that makes me the saddest. We will get some great people for a position that's open for a short period of time. And then because they don't get chosen, you never hear from them again. You just lost 6 to 10 great people that could have been plugged in somewhere, but we don't have a process for that. So I think in talking about this, how do we make sure that we don't let all the fish out of the bucket? Because there's some great ones in there and we need to be able to capture all that talent and those gifts and those opportunities for giving back to the city.
Right, Jane, I could not agree with you more. And I wonder too if there's an opportunity with, a revamped form and the stuff that we're talking about, to also put on there a place where we ask them, if you're not immediately selected for a position, number one, would you like us to keep you on file for future positions? But number two, would you like us to give your contact information to Christine?
Right.
Because a lot of times people will approach a board and a commission interview with the notion that they're wanting to volunteer for something. Mm-hmm. When it's like, well, maybe that's not the best place for you to start because you're just kind of dipping your toes in here. Maybe where you really need to start is with working with Christine and some volunteer opportunities to learn a little bit more about the city. And then you're going to be really ready to fully dive in and not just dip your toes in. So I think that there's a way we could kind of cross-pollinate, if you will, a little bit there.
Yeah, we do put that in the letters that we send out to people who are not chosen. We send them a letter and encourage them to contact Christine, and we give them her contact information.
Yeah, I want it right.
We are doing, but I think definitely put it on the form too. But I think another good thing would be to have our board and commission members either call on them a little bit to be recruiters.
Yes, totally.
The people who run in their circles are the people that we're looking for, especially if they're a rock star and they are really engaged and they're really great. And then we want their friends to come too. So, yeah.
The only other thing that I think is a little bit of a challenge for us that I'd like to throw out there is really recruiting for some diversity on our boards and commissions as well. That has consistently been a challenge. And I think, we've created more avenues for working with some of our diverse populations with the partnerships that we have, for example, with JASCO and with our Asian population through WeChat and things like that. So I want to make sure that as we talk about some of the social media areas where we post these things, that we're including those as well, because I think it's really important that we get some additional diversity, really involved in the city. And I know that has been a challenge. We talked about it when with the Friends Committee constantly. So I want to throw that out there. We don't need to make a bunch of comments or whatever about it unless you want to have a long conversation, but I just want to make sure that we're aware of that and we will have a diligent effort to get out there into those more diverse social media channels as we advertise for these positions.
Great. And as we're on this, a couple things that I've thought as well. Right now, if you go look, the boards and commissions, you'll see planning and zoning. They're disparate. I guess I would say there isn't a place to say I would like to serve in the city. What are my options? Sort of an entry gate in, because right now people don't know what the Board of Zoning Appeals does, and we've talked about mechanisms here to improve that. We should do that. But also some sort of gateway, as Sue mentioned before, wouldn't it be nice to have a gateway in? And part of this are just how websites have been built over the years, right? They're content-driven pages, as you mentioned, rather than sort of always subject-driven pages. And the subject here is I want to engage with the city and I want to volunteer. That's the subject. How do I figure out where I want to go? And so maybe help us imagine a bit how to bring that together. If you went to some communities that I found, they'll list sort of here are all the engagement opportunities in kind of one pool, and then you can spend some time divvying your way around that. Now, a boring list is not what I'm envisioning here, but some sort of a gateway into engagement. And it could have the interest form there. It could also have things like watch the last 2 meetings, the planning and zoning or the board of, whatever you want to do as well. But sort of some way of thinking about how to present volunteerism, as Jane said, to the world in a more consolidated way, we might capture more interest, because, some of these are pretty dry when you read them on the surface, right? Let's face it.
No, I think to your point, Kathy, having a little bit more of a dynamic website, which I think Jenny put in the recommendations, I think would be really huge, because people sometimes they just don't know where to start. And if we can understand a little bit upfront what they're interested in, then we can sort of direct them rather than them trying to consume all that information that's on the boards and commissions pages, because it's a lot.
It's too much.
Right.
And the other thing that I, as people are applying, as Jane said, we'll get the comment, I just want to serve, whatever, and we'll inquire, have they attended any of these? No, they have not. Now, because we have virtual meetings, we can ask people to attend. So when someone applies, I think one of the things we could think about are, here's 5 things we recommend you do before the interview. So the before the interview discussion here, watch 3 of these meetings. Here's a link to our community plan. Read the community plan. What is the community plan? Here's 3 names if you want to ask anybody a question. Sort of it's sort of a recruitment thing. But before you come, here's some things we might suggest, so that we have much more robust interviews than we're able to have now. It's not their fault; it's our fault, I think.
Right.
And here is really sort of the charter of the city. If you don't have a reason to read it, maybe you wouldn't have read it, but it's a really important document. So things like that to help us think about, find them, recruit them, then get them ready to have a successful interview, and sort of along that journey process. Those were just a couple things that I had jotted down that might help us move forward.
I like that, Kathy. It's a little bit of a prep checklist.
I think it will help them have a better interview. Nobody wants to say, no, I've never read that, right?
No, they don't want to come in and feel like they're completely unprepared. I mean, I think it's a great idea. I love the little, here's the 5 things we recommend you do before I love that. I love the check. I'm a big checklist person to begin with, so that fits right in my type A slot, Kathy.
Well, a lot of the people that are raising their hands are people that want to feel that just like you do, right? They want to go and saying, I want to know if this is a match for both of us, and I'm not sure what I needed to do to prepare. So again, I think, Ruth, I hate to put this on your back, but it sounds like there's work here in designing some of these things, because I know all these materials exist, except for the videos. We have to work on those, but Jane's been trying to get in there. Jane,
Yeah, no, I want to relieve Bruce of the sweat on his forehead here, because the planning department and if you'll remember, about a year ago, we came before council in a work session to talk about boards and commissions and training and all of that. We've been working this past summer, and then the pandemic hit, it took a little dip, but we've been working on many of the things that you're requesting here so I can get together with you, Bruce, and give you an entire think tank worth of stuff about recruiting. And it also, as we're talking about this, we are just talking about recruiting, but there's also a list of council expectations on how to pick good recruits for these commissions, which I can share with you. So we have been doing a lot of thinking about that. We did a lot of interviews with commission members, with commission chairs. We got a whole list of suggestions on what is required, and I can probably make your path a little bit easier. So we can get together and talk. And then the other thing I wanted to say is on the community engagement piece in this main gateway, I think because Christine Nardekia is now community engagement director, it would be really good to get her thoughts on what works for her, how we can do this together with that particular department. Because even though commissions fall under council, it's still a volunteer position. So I think it's a good idea to get her input on some of this, or a lot of this.
Christina, I had a thought about your diversity issue, and I feel like if Dana was part of this meeting, he would have suggested it, so I will in his place. The community task force, you've established that, and you have a lot of people who are really engaged in that. And I've sat in a couple of their meetings, and they are really, really interested in moving some things forward. So this could be something that you ask a recommendation from them on how they might reach people who aren't necessarily as inclined to raise their hand.
No, I think that's great. And I think you're right. Dana would have said it. And actually, when I was on my little notes here, I wrote it down. I'm like, what about the community task force? So I'm glad that you mentioned it. We're right there with each other.
So Jenny I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead, Christine. She muted herself. So Jenny, as we were going through this, and do this, and add this, and this would be good. Thoughts or other considerations, because Jenny does so much of the heavy lifting here with us on this. As we were talking about building this repository, I know you have a repository because you're able to go back and say, here are the people that applied. Is it possible to create a repository? Now, I think when somebody applies, it is not public that they applied, correct, Jenny? No. So it's not something that it would be necessarily a public, but to the point earlier, would you like to be considered for additional service and, into the future? And again, if it's more an expression of interest than applying for a specific, then, we could have a repository where we could create connections and do some things and really, really connect people with each other within that group, right?
That's where I think Christine comes in handy too, because they may not, I love that, Kathy, because where they may not be able to fit into the one slot that they thought they applied for, they may be surprised by being considered valuable by the city to be reconnected and suggested on something else,
And then, having a process for regular review. We didn't talk about that, but this is going to be important too. And it would seem that it would fall to this body, just because this body is responsible for boards and commissions, to look at those interested, be sure we're engaging with them. The worst thing that could happen is they did a thing of interest and they get their letter back or their email back that said, we got your application, and then crickets happen, right? So, do we reach out to them and just sort of do a very brief informational interview do we find some way of engaging with them? Because it could be 9 months before we have an opportunity or not. So I don't know what that process is, but I think, again, along that journey, we're going to need something. We're going to need something in that step as well, right? Once they raise their hand, because in the old process, 3 weeks later or 2 weeks later or 24 hours later, we're having an interview with them, right? So, how do we effectively respect their time and their interest and make that all work when somebody has raised their hand? So I think, Jenny, we would like your thoughts about how to, how we could effectively manage that potentially.
Right. I can tell you repository wise, right now, everything is pretty much manual. We're putting them in folders and we're, marking them a certain way on our network. And then when you ask us to go back and look, we literally thumb through the folder and see who we have. It's all very, very manual. All the letters we send out, we type every one of them. So that's where some of these automated systems come in, is they track all of that stuff. But yeah, that's kind of how we're keeping them right now. I certainly think there could be a better way to do it for sure. That's why I'm sitting in on all these demos. I'm probably driving Ann crazy. Sorry, Ann. But
Jenny, out of curiosity, what system does the city use for their HR recruiting?
I know that they store everything in Unis, but I don't know. I'm not sure, to be honest.
So the reason that I ask is that I can't see why you wouldn't be able to use a standard employee recruiting type of software to do boards and commissions as well. So you may not need to reinvent the wheel at all. So you might want to get with HR and take a look at what recruiting system they're using, and see if there's a way that you could adapt that for boards and commissions, because that would sure help you out a lot.
Oh, yeah.
If I may, just for a second, Volgistics, I know, is what Christine uses for her volunteers. And since you guys were talking about including Christine into this, I mean, she has a pool of people it's the deepest pool I've ever seen. So, I mean, and it's talk about diversity as well. So that might be something too to tap into when we loop her into this conversation.
It's a really good call. She writes, she has the deepest well of anyone I've ever known.
And we definitely
It's
need
invited
to
to the next meeting.
Right. We should have invited her to this one, because honestly, was the intention, I think, of council when we changed it from just the volunteer department to the community engagement department, was to be able to utilize that department for in getting the citizens to know where they might fit in as part of the system. So I definitely think we need to take advantage of that. And the other thing I want to bring up, and it also applies to our earlier conversation, we have to remember too that the demographics here in Dublin, there are a lot of seniors. We have like 55% population of seniors. Not everybody is going to be reached on these technological platforms, right? But the wealth of their talents, especially those who may be retired and looking for an interesting way to give back to the community, may not be reached on the traditional new social media platforms. So we have to be really cognizant that when we do reach out, we reach out in a variety of ways.
Yeah.
Jane, we're going to need to figure that out. And maybe the communication team already has, is what percentage of the population is not engaged? Because again, I think COVID is changing that in a very rapid way. I did a Zoom call with my mother, who until recently never had an ATM card, right? So I just, I'm wondering if that isn't changing here as well. So I think we need to understand that. I agree with you, but we need to understand what that is, how big that is, and what would be that mechanism, because I think we're going to see that change a lot faster than we would have had guessed prior COVID.
I agree. And what's interesting too, I asked for Christmas for the little Amazon Nest that you can just say, call my daughter or whatever. Alexa changed things for a lot of our seniors and gave connections. It could be that we can get more information out to our seniors, not only just through the Alexa sound audio, but all through the dynamics of these new video platforms that are sitting in your home, and all you have to do is talk to it. I'm just saying that we don't have to give up on our seniors, and I include myself as one of them, because we don't have great technical, capacities, but we can learn them all the time. And sometimes we need to think about, as a city, how we help those who aren't reached by them learn how to be reached by them.
So we can, not to go down a bunny trail, but I do think we need to understand, to that point, how big that is, and how do we manage through that.
Right.
Other thoughts? I just wanted to make one comment before I forget. We started one process with boards and commissions last year, a new process, which is an annual 30-minute touch base with every one of the commission and board members to say, how's it going, what's working, what's not, etc. I don't know that I had shared that in full with this group. I know we talked a bit about that at council. We're going to do that again in January. And reach out and spend time. And of course, there'll be Zoom calls, right, this time, but to do some touch base. But so I know we wanted to focus this conversation today really on recruitment, but there's also the retention part of this that, I think as we're doing this, we should explore a little bit about, making sure it's the best possible experience it can be from the volunteers' perspective, if we can help make it be, right? If there's things we can do and improve as well. So other thoughts or comments?
The only one I would add is that, since we're talking recruitment, I think it's also important, and I can forward some things about the expectations of council members in choosing particular candidates. And I think it's also helpful to have some sort of a criteria list, a standard list of questions. Council should have in front of them what the obligations and the requirements of the job description are, because many times new council members aren't familiar with that. So it's kind of nice to have a manual or something to guide council members to help make good decisions on recruitment.
Great. So sort of one final request, maybe from my perspective on this, and that is, as we go through this, let's see if we can't create some metrics and measurements that helps us understand if this is having any impact at all. So, what did we do? How many responded? Who actually raised their hand and said a general interest form? What is our diversity mix in that? Who then later, when we reached out? So as we're designing this and thinking about this, Chris, could you help us think about how to get some metrics and measure and the tools in here, so that when we come back around and we say, well, how's that going?
Yes, absolutely.
We can figure out, they came to the page, they didn't touch anything, they left, or they watched 32 videos and we couldn't get rid of them. It was a wonderful experience. So help us understand that too, so that we can explore this.
And I don't know if
absolutely.
this is a possibility or not, but they had one of these software things that I watched. One of the things they did was they would be able to tell if someone entered the site, started to fill out an application, but then left before they completed it. And so sometimes when you shop online, not that I ever do, it'll tell you if you put something in your cart, but then you don't buy it, they'll tell you, hey, you left something in your cart. They'll email you and say, you left something in your cart, you're going to come back and buy it. That would be kind of neat to be able to go back and talk to the people who started to maybe fill it out, but just didn't go back to it too. I don't know.
So what, Jenny, you actually leave stuff in the cart? I don't think I've ever done that.
Dreaming, Kathy. I dream all the time. Put stuff in my cart and then think, oh, I can't do that.
But to your point, there's just wonderful, we don't have to invent the wheel. There's wonderful examples out there of people who figured out how to market and recruit in these ways. So other thoughts or comments, or we'll give each other 30 minutes back on our Friday afternoon.
That would be great.
Hey, Bruce, thank you very much. I know you came in here with a lot to do and left with a lot more to do. So, yeah.
It's all good. You are welcome. Thank you for having me.
Okay, great. So, because we covered so much, if it's the will of the committee, I think we'll try to do a written report to council on this a little bit. Certainly not for Monday. We can't prepare it for Monday, but we'll report that we'll have a written report in January for our January council meeting. And then that'll give us time to sequence some of the things that we talked about what we're going to do and how fast we're, give us a little breathing room. Does that seem fair?
Sounds good.
Okay. Great. Anything else before we wish each other a happy weekend? Thank you, Jenny, for your homework, and Bruce for your homework, and Christina, thank you for bringing forward that last topic. I think it's important. I think we made some progress today. So
Yeah, thanks guys for everything. Thanks for letting me plop this on the agenda. It's been something that's been nagging me for a few years now. So
great.
You.
Thank you all. See you soon.
have a great weekend. Bye.
Bye.